We bought a house for three, me, my husband, and his mother. She paid half, and we took out a loan for the rest. I kept every receipt in a notebook and believed that transparency meant trust. I'm pregnant, I said at dinner. Linda didn't look up or say a word. A week later, there was a letter in the mailbox. Request for early sale approval, signed by all the co-owners except me. When I put the key in the lock, it wouldn't turn. The house I had built suddenly didn't recognize me. We walked into the duplex on Saturday morning. It smelled of fresh paint and dust. My knees were stained with dirt, my palms covered in white plaster. Jason laughed as I tried to stick the painter's tape evenly along the baseboard. Hold it like this, he corrected. Perfect. Linda stood in the middle of the living room with a notebook and her finger on the page. For optimization, she said. First the kitchen. Then the hallway. Money doesn't grow on trees. Every nail costs money. Who's taking notes? I picked up my notebook. A simple, checkered one. On the cover was written house/expenses. The title was held by three of us in equal shares, tenancy in common, 1/3 each, Linda, Jason, and me. Me, I said. I wrote down, glue, $12.49, plaster, $8.90, bolts, $6.30, next to it was the date. Next to it were initials. The stairs creaked. The old carpet was still in the other half of the house. Linda poked it with the toe of her shoe. Take it out. We'll rent this part out quickly to cover the loan. Don't get attached to the walls. The asset has to work. She spoke calmly, as if she were talking about bills. I nodded. I had paint on my fingers, and I felt that this was our start. In the evening, we sat down at the kitchen table. I made pasta and salad. The kitchen still had no curtains, the lamp shone directly on us, and the table was rough after sanding. I twirled my fork for a long time, then said, I'm pregnant. The silence was so thick you could hear the spoon touching the side of the plate. Linda didn't look up. She just moved her calculator closer, as if she had remembered something, and took a breath. Jason looked at me briefly, then at her. Well, he said and fell silent. I added. I'm scared, but I'm happy. Linda moved her plate an inch. Congratulations, she said flatly. The contractor will be here tomorrow morning at 9 to look at the bathroom in the rental half. Don't forget to be home. At night, we lay with our backs to the wall. I searched for his hand under the blanket. Is everything okay? I asked. She's just nervous, he replied. Be flexible. Mom put in half. Her opinion matters. What about mine? I asked. It matters too, he said, and I didn't hear any confidence in his voice. Before going to bed, I opened my notebook and flipped through the pages. Glue, plaster, bolts. Checks in a file. I've always believed that transparency is trust. I closed the notebook and put it under the lamp. In the morning, I went into the kitchen. Good morning, I said. Linda was standing at the sink, typing something on her phone with her thumbs. She didn't answer. I only heard the click of her fingernail on the screen. The coffee in the kitchen smelled strong, as always. Linda sat by the window with her tablet, scrolling through real estate websites. Prices are rising, she said, without looking at me. If we're going to sell, it's now. The market is hot. I poured myself a cup and replied calmly. We're not going to sell. We just finished renovating. Don't get attached to the walls. An asset should work, she said the word asset as if she were talking about stocks, not a house. I remained silent. I saw a notebook on the kitchen table. It contained notes, paint, plaster, children's room. Everything we had done together. Linda looked at my stomach, then back at the tablet. A child is an expense. And now is not the best time. During the day, I visited the tenants in the other half of the house. 5 days had passed since my conversation at dinner until the first request for early sale approval. The young couple who rented from us were baking cupcakes. They smiled and thanked us for everything working properly and for being so accommodating. "You're not planning to sell, are you?" the man asked, noticing my expression. "No," I said, although for the first time in my life I wasn't sure. Jason came home late that evening. "Mom thinks we should seize the moment," he said, opening a beer. "I think we should leave the house alone." He shrugged. "We're adults. We have to be practical, not romantic." "And what is a child? An unprofitable project?" He didn't answer, just switched the TV to football. Later, I opened the banking app. The loan payments were on time. The balance was stable. Everything was working. I took a screenshot, just to have it. The next morning, when I went out to check the mail, there was an official envelope among the advertising brochures. It had the bank's logo and the words, "Request for early sale approval." 3 signatures. Jason, Linda, and an empty space for mine. I took a photo of the screen with the payments and thought for the first time, what if they've already decided everything without me? On the 7th day after that letter, at 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. A man with a badge and a tablet in his hand was standing on the doorstep. "Good afternoon. I'm from the appraisal company. The inspection is scheduled for today," he said. I didn't understand right away. "What inspection?" While I was asking, Linda appeared behind him. She had the keys in her hands. "Let's go," she said calmly. "We're working out the details with the bank." They went to inspect the rooms. I stood aside, holding my phone in my hand as if it somehow protected me. "Excuse me," I said to the appraiser. "Who called you?" He shrugged. The co-owner submitted the application. Linda showed them the kitchen and told them how much she had invested in the renovation. "My money, my renovation," she said in front of me, without even looking back. When they left, I called Jason. "What's going on?" I asked. "Don't panic. It's just an inspection. Mom wants to know the current value." "We lost a client because of the loan rate," he said, as if apologizing. "Why?" "Just in case. You know she likes to be in control." In the evening, I tried to log into my online mortgage account. The password that always worked now showed a red access denied. The bank recorded an attempt to change KYC from another device. The screenshot is in the proof_0 folder. I tried again. Same thing. I wrote to Jason, "Did you change the access?" He replied an hour later, "The system reset it." "I'll look into it." My stomach sank. I opened my email to check my spam folder. And there, among the ads and order confirmations, was an email with the subject line listing agreement attached. The sender was the title company I knew from the purchase agreement. I opened the attachment. On the last page were the signatures. Among them was mine. Or rather, something that looked like it. But it wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't my date. I took a screenshot, then another. I created a new folder on my laptop and named it simply proof_0. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of them, but of the fact that I had enough evidence to see this through to the end. That night, for the first time, I couldn't sleep. The living room smelled of coffee and dust. I waited for Jason to take off his jacket. "Can we talk?" I said evenly. "About what?" "About the appraiser who was in our house. And about the signature on the documents that was made in my name." He looked down. "You're exaggerating again. Mom just wanted to find out the current price." "Don't tell me Mom wanted. This is our home." Linda came out of the kitchen. She was holding a cup and sat down on the sofa, like a spectator in a theater. "Our house, you say," she said. "Without me, this house wouldn't even exist. Without my money, without my experience." I clenched my fists. Do you really want to evict me? She smiled dryly. No one is evicting anyone. We just have to think rationally. Jason was silent. His hands rested on his knees, his fingers clenching nervously. Say something, I looked directly at him. Are you with me? Pause. Mom put in half. She has a right to decide. What about me? Linda put her cup on the table. The glass left a wet ring on the wood. I didn't sign a contract for your child, she said calmly. Don't mix personal feelings with finances. It became difficult to breathe. A wave of hot shame and anger rose in my chest. You're reducing me to zero, I whispered. But I'm not zero. We'll see, Linda replied. We stood in silence until the neighbor behind the wall knocked on the wall. Quiet. I went to the bedroom without turning around. I closed the door and leaned against it with my shoulder. Her voice was still ringing in my ears. When someone tells you to be rational, check the locks. The next morning, I put the key in the lock when I came back from the store. It was 8:12 a.m. I had returned from the store to buy milk, and suddenly the key stopped working. It wouldn't turn. I tried again. The cold metal slid into the keyhole and stopped. I realized that I had been locked out. The rain started unexpectedly, fine, sticky, with wind. There were cardboard boxes on the porch, some of them already soggy from the water. A black garbage bag lay on top. The sleeve of my sweater was sticking out of it. I moved closer. One box had Sarah, clothes written on it in marker. The key in the door still wouldn't turn. I knocked. Silence. I knocked again, harder. A shadow flashed outside the window, someone had pulled back the curtain. Then everything went quiet. A few minutes later, the door opened. Jason. No shoes, wearing a t-shirt, his hair tousled. What's this? I asked. It's temporary, he said, immediately lowering his eyes. Just until things settle down. Are you serious? Mom said it's better if you stay somewhere else for now. I looked at him, he couldn't even look me in the eye. Jason, this is illegal. Don't start, he said quietly. Stay with Melissa until everything is sorted out. We'll talk. I stood in the rain, my hair sticking to my face. Talk? After you kicked me out of the house? He closed the door silently. The lock clicked. An hour later, the phone rang again. At the door was a social worker with a badge. An anonymous complaint, unsuitable conditions. I calmly showed her inside, a clean kitchen, a first aid kit, pregnancy certificates, a safety checklist. I recorded everything on a voice recorder. 30 minutes later, we signed the inspection report, no violations found. I put a copy in the proof_1 folder. I dialed 911. The voice on the other end of the line was calm. This is a civil matter, but we can record the fact of the lockout. The police car arrived in 20 minutes. The young officer took down my details and photographed the boxes. I advise you to keep all the evidence, he said. And consult a lawyer. When the car drove away, I sat down on the steps. The notebook with my expenses was in the top box, the pages slightly damp from the rain. I took it out and put it in my bag. I grabbed my laptop. The rest of my things could wait. I opened the car, threw my things on the back seat, and dialed the number. Melissa, it's me, I said, trying not to cry. Can I come to your place? Come over, she replied without hesitation. I'll put the kettle on. Melissa's house smelled of tea and laundry detergent. She hugged me without asking any questions. I stood in the doorway in my wet jacket, my eyes red, a notebook pressed to my chest. Sit down, she said. I have a blanket and cookies. We sat in the kitchen, listening to the washing machine running in the next room. Melissa poured tea and handed me a mug. You're not alone, she said simply. I nodded, though the words wouldn't come out. Later, when it got quieter, I opened my laptop. I laid out the receipts, bills, and statements. I began scanning everything in order: date, amount, category. In the top row of the table, I wrote evidence, repairs/investments. The scanner whirred, the screen glowed with a cold light. "What are you doing?" Melissa asked. "If they really want to sell, I have to show that I invested my money." She sat down next to me. "Save everything. Screenshots are documents too. Then you can sort it out with a lawyer. I'll find a free consultation, there's one in town." I nodded. I opened my email and started looking through old letters. And I came across Jason's correspondence with the real estate agent. Subject: buyer very interested. Text: we'll have the documents ready by the end of the week. She'll agree, it's a safe option. I reread it several times. My heart was pounding. "Look," I turned the screen toward Melissa. She leaned in. "So they were preparing the sale behind your back." I leaned back in my chair. "I'm afraid of court," I said. "And I don't even know where to start." Melissa shrugged. "It's normal to be afraid. But it's better to have a plan. We'll find someone to help you." Late at night, I was scrolling through the correspondence again. In the chat with the contractor, an old message from Linda popped up. "Sign for Sarah," she agreed. I showed it to Melissa. She looked at it and just said, "This is a crime. Tomorrow we're going to a lawyer." I closed my laptop and for the first time in several days felt, not exactly calm, but direction. The next morning, Melissa and I went downtown. The hallway of the free legal clinic was crowded with people carrying folders, envelopes, and children in their arms. I sat there, clutching my notebook and flash drive with documents. When my name was finally called, I entered a small office. A man in a gray jacket was sitting at a desk. His name tag read Attorney Richard Lee. "How can I help you?" he asked. I briefly explained everything: the house, the forged signature, the locked doors. I put the checks, screenshots, and letters in front of him. He looked through them carefully, silently flipping through the pages. Then he said, "If you are a co-owner, no sale is possible without your signature. Even if they try, it's fraud." "But they've already drawn up the documents," I said, showing him a printout of the listing agreement. "Without notarized confirmation of your signature, it's fictitious," he said, looking up. "We can file a claim of forgery and demand a temporary injunction against any actions involving the property." Richard also filed a lease pendens so that no title company could conduct a transaction without me. I took a deep breath. "So I have a chance?" "Not just a chance. You have a right. They were counting on your confusion. It won't work." He printed out a few pages and handed me a pen. "Sign here. And bring me everything, even text messages, even screenshots of chats. Anything that mentions the house or signatures." I nodded. My hands trembled slightly as I signed. As I left the building, I took a deep breath. It was cold, but for the first time in many days, I felt like I had someone to lean on. Melissa was waiting at the door. "Well?" she asked. "We're filing a complaint. And we're imposing a restraining order." In the evening, while reviewing my emails on my laptop, I saw a new message from Linda. It was short, with no salutation. "Sign as Sarah B. We need to close the deal quickly." I forwarded it to my lawyer with the subject line: Proof of forgery. Part 1. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined. White light, a clock ticking above the door, the sound of footsteps muffled. I sat next to Richard, clutching my notebook. Even though I knew it wasn't needed here, everything had already been printed out. The judge entered without fanfare, opened the case, and reviewed the documents. Plaintiff's side, please explain briefly, he said. Richard stood up. My client is a co-owner of the property. The other co-owners attempted to complete the sale without her participation, using a forged signature. All evidence is in the case file. We request a temporary injunction against any action involving the property. The judge nodded. Defense? Linda sat next to Jason, holding a bag in her hands. This is a misunderstanding, she said evenly. We didn't mean to do anything illegal. The signature may have been scanned from another document by mistake. Richard showed the judge an enlarged sample of the signature on the screen. Your Honor, here is a copy, and here is my client's real signature. The difference is obvious. The judge looked closely. Ms. Bennett, do you confirm that this is not your signature? Yes, I replied. I did not sign this. There was a few seconds of silence. Then he nodded briefly. Very well. A temporary injunction is imposed on any actions with the property until the verification of signatures and financial transactions is complete. The court also confirmed the lease pendens until the examination was complete. The room fell silent. Richard whispered quietly. The first step has been taken. Linda leaned over to Jason and whispered something. I saw him nod. After the hearing, Richard and I went out to the stairs. They won't stop, he said. Keep everything ready. The next step is handwriting analysis. I was walking toward the exit when my phone vibrated. A new message from the bank. A counterclaim has been added to your case. Charges of mortgage fraud, defendant, Sarah Bennett. I stood on the stairs with my phone in my hand, and my sense of relief turned to coldness. They had gone on the offensive. A week later, we were sitting in the same room, but the atmosphere was different, tense, like before a storm. Richard laid out the documents on the table, with a flash drive next to them. On the projector screen was an enlarged signature. According to the conclusion of the handwriting expert, Richard said, standing at the table, this signature does not belong to my client. The conclusion is attached. The judge nodded. Continue. The next slide showed screenshots of bank logins, the date, time, and IP addresses. Here you can see who changed the mortgage access. It was done from a device registered to Linda Grayson. Linda pressed her lips together. Jason sat next to her, pale. Continue, said the judge. The audio was turned on. The voice of the contractor who worked for us during the renovation. I was told to sign the documents for Sarah. They said she had given her permission, she just didn't have time. Richard looked at the judge. This is a recording of a conversation made in the presence of witnesses. After a pause, he picked up a sheet of paper with the title company's logo. Official response, without the personal presence of S. Bennett, the deal is impossible. I sat silently, clutching my knees. The judge was silent for a long time, then looked up at Linda. Ms. Grayson, did you know about the forgery? She looked away. I trusted Jason. The judge looked at him. Do you confirm this? Jason sighed. I just wanted to speed up the process. She was pregnant at the time. I thought it was a minor thing. The courtroom fell silent. I felt something hot rising in my chest, not fear, but strength. Richard concluded briefly. We ask the court to recognize the forgery, confirm my client's share, and initiate separate criminal proceedings for document falsification. The judge looked at me, then at them. The documents will be forwarded to the prosecutor's office. The final decision will be made after verification. I looked at Jason. His gaze was empty. When we left, Richard said quietly. Now it's serious. For them, it's a possible criminal case. I nodded. And for the first time, I felt fear giving way to something else, determination. A few days after the meeting, Jason showed up unannounced. He stood in the doorway with 2 suitcases. I came to pick up my things, he said quietly. I let him in without saying a word. He walked around the room, packing shirts, wires, documents. It looked as if he was just moving out of a rental, not out of life. Are you moving in with Linda? I asked. For now, yes. It's easier there. It won't get any easier, I said. He didn't answer. He stuffed his things into the suitcases and zipped them up. As he was leaving, I saw that he had left his wedding ring on the table. He just put it there and left. Without a word. His wedding ring on the table weighed more than the suitcases. The next morning, I filed for divorce. In the application, I wrote briefly, incompatibility and breach of trust. Richard helped me get everything done quickly. A few days later, a message came from the bank. Withdrawal of funds from joint deposit, full amount. The date was the day before I filed. I called Jason. Did you take the money? It was my mother's money. We just moved it to a safe place. Safe for whom? I asked. Don't make a scene, he replied and hung up. When Richard heard this, he just sighed. We'll add this to the lawsuit. It's a joint account. They exceeded their rights. That evening, I looked at the empty shelf where our photo frame used to stand. The dust left a rectangular mark. I wiped it with my sleeve. The phone rang late. It was Linda. You destroyed the family, she said in an even tone. The family? I repeated. You destroyed it when you closed the door on me. There was silence on the other end. Then a short click and a dial tone. I put down the phone and walked over to the window. It was already getting dark outside. My mind wasn't empty, only clear. I would fight for everything that was left. Not out of revenge. For myself. The labor started earlier than expected. At night. I sat on the floor next to Melissa's bed, breathing, counting the seconds between contractions. She woke up from my scream, grabbed her bag, and said only one word to the taxi driver, labor. At the hospital, they put me in a room, and the nurse asked. Is anyone else coming? No, I replied. It's just the two of us. Melissa held my hand as the pain came in waves. Breathe, she repeated calmly. I squeezed her fingers until my vision went white. 2 hours later, I heard a faint cry. Then a heartbeat. Fast, steady, alive. The nurse placed the tiny body on my chest. It's a girl, she said. Congratulations. I didn't cry right away. I just stared. Tiny fingers, a warm hat, a bracelet with her name on it. Lila, I whispered. After her grandmother. Melissa wiped my cheek with a towel. It's a beautiful name, she said. You have a home, where she is. I smiled through my exhaustion. My phone flashed on the table, a message from Richard. The forgery case is open. The investigation has begun. I put my phone back. Lila was breathing nearby. Her breath was quiet but steady. A day later, we were discharged. In the hospital corridor, I stopped by the window. In my arms was a blanket with a little face on it. Other mothers were coming towards me, all with someone by their side, a husband, a mother, relatives. I only had Melissa, and that was enough. At home, I created a new folder on my laptop. SB and Lila, home. In it was the first photo, a copy of the birth certificate, and a letter from the lawyer. After everyone fell asleep, I sat by the crib for a long time. Lila was moving, clenching her fists. We'll start over, I said quietly. And this time everything will be fair. The date of the court hearing was marked on the calendar. I knew that the next day would change everything. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse in the morning. The hallway smelled of coffee and old paper. Richard was standing by the door, looking through documents. Today is the end of this story, he said. Be ready for anything, but you've already won by getting here. The courtroom was cool. Linda sat upright, Jason next to her. They didn't look in my direction. The judge opened the case and immediately got to the point. The forgery of the signature has been confirmed by expert analysis. All sales transactions conducted without the participation of Ms. Bennett are declared invalid. 1/3 of the shares are assigned to her. Linda clutched her bag. The judge continued. Given the conflict between the parties, a decision is made to force the sale of the property with the funds distributed according to the shares. Also, compensation for damages to the plaintiff. The decision specifically states, the forgery is transferred to the prosecutor's office, and the costs of the examination are borne by the defendants. Richard nodded briefly to me. This is a fair decision, said the judge. Not always comfortable, but fair. I sat silently, feeling the tension gradually ease, as if someone were unwinding a tight spring in my chest. After the hearing, we signed several documents with the clerk. I was given a copy of the decision, a thick sheet of paper with the court seal. I held it in my hands as confirmation that I could no longer be simply excluded. A few weeks later, the sale took place. An escrow account, an official distribution, no accidental signatures. When the transfer arrived in my account, I was sitting at Melissa's kitchen table looking at the numbers on the screen. So what now? She asked. Now I finally get to decide where to live, I replied. That same day, Jason sent a short message. I'm sorry. We didn't mean it to be this way. Maybe we can talk? I didn't reply. His sorry didn't change anything. I opened a rental listing website and clicked on the filter, small house/Bellevue. Several photos appeared on the screen, bright rooms, a low fence, lilacs in the yard. I smiled. I no longer shared my home with anyone. The house in Bellevue was small, 2 rooms, a kitchen, and a garden with lilacs. A white fence, slightly crooked stairs, but everything was real, mine. On the first day, I replaced the locks. The repairman suggested leaving the old ones, but I refused. No, new ones, please. When he left, I engraved the letters SB and Lila on the key. Just with a ballpoint pen, on top of the metal, to know that this house begins with us. The first mornings here were quiet. Lila laughed in her crib, the sun fell through the curtains onto the floor. I cooked porridge and put it on the windowsill while I dressed Lila. After breakfast, kindergarten, work, in the evening a fairy tale and tea. I returned to the school where I used to work. As a teacher. The class is small, the children are noisy, the smell of chalk and ink pens. After everything that had happened, work seemed like a stability I hadn't felt in a long time. A colleague once said, "You've become brighter." I just smiled. The neighbors quickly got used to us. Mr. Daniels, a retiree across the street, waved to me every morning with a newspaper in his hand. His wife sometimes brought cookies for Lila. They didn't ask questions, and that was the best thing. In the evenings, I would go out on the porch. The scent of lilacs filled the air, Lila was asleep in her room, and the house was filled with the silence I had once dreamed of. "Do you hear that, Lila?" I whispered into the darkness. This is the silence of our home. One day, there was an envelope with no return address in the mailbox. It was small, cream-colored, and neatly folded. I took it inside, put it on the table, and just stared at it for a while. The envelope read, "To Sarah Bennett." I felt my heart start to beat faster. I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "I'm sorry. I want to see Lila. Jason." I sat with that piece of paper in my hands for a long time, while the tea in my cup cooled down. So much time had passed, and his voice had reappeared in my life. The next morning, I put the letter back in the envelope and put it in a drawer. Before closing it, I thought, I will decide when and how he will appear in our home. Not him. It took me a few days to respond. Briefly, "I can meet you. Without the child. At the cafe on 5th, tomorrow, 6 p.m. The cafe was small, smelling of cinnamon and coffee. I arrived a little early and chose a table by the window. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He was thin, with gray hair at his temples, wearing a cheap jacket. His eyes looked tired. "Hi," he said, sitting down across from me. "You look good." "Thanks," I replied calmly. "What did you want?" He took a folded piece of paper out of his pocket. This isn't official, I just wanted to explain. Mom sold everything and went to her sister's in Florida. I was left with nothing. Why now? I asked. Because I realized what I had done. And I want to at least see Lila. I looked at him silently. He talked about his new life, about his mistakes, about how he had fixed himself. His voice was calm, but I could see it wasn't remorse, but an escape from emptiness. If you really want to see Lila, I said, it will only be in my presence. Briefly. Slowly. No promises. He nodded. Okay. We sat in silence for a few more minutes. He looked at my hands, no wedding ring, just a thin bracelet. You're still strong, he said. Because I had to be, I replied. When we were paying, he paused for a second, as if he wanted to say something but changed his mind. I dream of going home, he said quietly as he was leaving. Home isn't an address, Jason. It's a responsibility, I said. At home, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time. His voice and gaze kept running through my head. In the early morning, I got up, made coffee, and wrote a short message. You can come on Friday at 5 p.m. To the yard. Lila and I will be home. I pressed send and felt a weight lift from my chest. Not from fear. From control. Friday was warm. After lunch, I washed the floor, put the kettle on the stove, and trimmed the lilacs by the porch. Lila was drawing on the terrace with colored pencils, the sun was shining on her hair, and she laughed when the wind blew the papers away. At 5 o'clock, I heard a car pull up. Jason stopped in the yard. He stood there holding a box, like a gift, and looked around uncertainly. Hi, he said when I opened the gate. Hi, I replied. Come on in. Lila ran out onto the porch and looked at him wide-eyed. Is that Daddy? She asked quietly. I nodded. Yes. And he's visiting us today. We sat down on a bench in the yard. Lila showed him her drawings, the neighbor's cat, a little house, the sun. You draw beautifully, he said. That's me and Mom, she replied, showing him a drawing of two figures standing under a tree. He smiled, but there was a flash of sadness in his eyes. Then they talked about school, Mr. Daniel's cat, and their favorite ice cream. I stood nearby, listening and watching Lila laugh, easily, without fear. When she ran after the ball, Jason turned to me. I've been thinking a lot. Maybe we could start over? For her. Not today, I said evenly. And not like that. We have boundaries. He nodded, looked down. I was a coward, Sarah. Yes, I said calmly. But I'm not your home anymore. I'm her home. We stood silently while Lila ran up and took my hand. Mom, can I have ice cream? Yes. As they walked to the gate, I said. Thank you for coming. But this isn't a return. It's just a meeting. He nodded. I know. When the gate closed, I went back into the house. I opened the door with the key, the one engraved with SB and Lila. The new lock clicked. The house was quiet, smelling of lilacs and tea. I sat down on the floor near the nursery and smiled. The house I had opened myself finally recognized me.